Welcome to the test set. Here we talk with some of the brightest thinkers and tinkerers in statistical analysis, scientific computing, and machine learning, digging into what makes them tick, plus the insights, experiments, and OMG moments that shape the field. On this episode, we sit down with Kelly Bodwin, board game nerd, candy corn defender, and assistant professor of statistics and data science at Cal Poly. Hey Kelly, welcome to the test set, where we chat with interesting folks in data and see what makes them tick. We're so happy to have you on. For a little bit of background, Kelly Bodwin is a professor at Cal Poly, which is short for California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo. And we're also joined by Wes McKinney, who's a principal architect at Posit and the creator of Pandas and interesting libraries like IBIS and Python. So, Kelly, we're so excited to have you on. We've chatted with a few different people who are professors and educators. I feel like I'm so excited to talk because I love the energy you bring to anytime we see at conferences. And I know when preparing for this, you mentioned a lot of really interesting stuff about sort of how you got to where you are today, and also what makes you tick in terms of collaboration. But to maybe kick it off, I'm curious to hear what gets you out of bed in the morning, and is it, per our conversation, a Coke and orange juice?
Yeah. I think I put as a controversial opinion that a morning drink I enjoy. I don't drink it that much because it's very sugary. But yeah, half Coke, Coca-Cola, and half orange juice, and it's like Orangina, but with a little caffeine. It is the
Okay,
ideal
with a
morning
little bit
drink.
of a kick.
It looks
Yeah,
weird, but it tastes delicious. So don't knock it till you try it.
yeah. Are you
Yeah.
toting this like in a Coke bottle, or do you have it in a do you
Well, so
disguise
this
it?
was, like,
What's
born
your
in college, so it was from the machines, so it was in a little plastic cup. So I think you have to see the weird color to truly appreciate the drink. Yeah,
Yeah, you're saying this is born out of like an undergrad dining hall where you have
exactly.
the orange juice right here and the Coke right here, and it'd
Exactly,
be
yeah.
so easy just to yeah, okay,
I didn't have a
nice. Wait,
caffeine habit until grad school, and so, like, this much Coca-Cola was enough to wake me up all day. Those
yeah.
were the days.
Wait, I
Anyway,
love that. I love it was born out of undergrad dining hall ingenuity, which
yeah,
makes so much sense to me. Yeah, what gets you out of bed in the morning outside
yeah,
of,
then
fancy beverages?
I mean, so definitely the main motivator for me is always, like, other people, either excitement to see them or knowing they have expectations on me. So this is why the professor job works well for me because I gotta get out of bed because I gotta teach a class. So I can't just not go to that. I'm not a morning person, so, you know,
Right, and you're
literally what gets me out of bed is that I have commitments.
the need to
But
appear.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I
But,
love that.
what's exciting to me is always the human interaction. Like, I was not a happy person during COVID. Um, and I know it's not possible, but I'd rather be in person with you 2 as well. I like being in my department, I'm friends with all my colleagues in my department, and we chat in the hallways, and then, being in the classroom with students is really fun. I really like the lecturing, and I really like chatting with them, so those are the things that motivate me, and, uh, and then, outside of the teaching context, like, even in my personal life, I'm known to not be home in the evenings 'cause I just wanna go see people and do the things most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, so you're like you mentioned you're sort of deep into a quarter. Like, what does your week look like, as a professor?
This quarter, I'm, pretty chock-a-block, like 9 to 6. So I have 3 different classes right now that I'm teaching, which is typical load for us, 3 courses or well, it's usually like 3 sections, but sometimes 2 will be the same course. So after this, I've gotta rush over and teach 4 hours of lecture. And then we just started a master's program, which is really cool. So this is the 3rd year of it, the 2nd year that I've supervised students, so I've got 4 master's students. So I've got, meetings with them scattered throughout the week, and then lots of admin and grading type stuff throughout the day too, I'm on committees and whatnot. So What I like about the job, right, is that, like, every day looks quite different and every quarter looks quite different. Right now, it's week 7 out of 10. We just gave midterms, so I've got a pile of midterms sitting over here to grade, and that and that makes it a tough time in the quarter. But yeah, I mean, the average day is just like running across campus from a meeting to a lecture to a meeting to office hours. Yeah.
And do your master students, are they working what does their work look like? Like, do they work in different fields or
I mean, it's a statistics master's program, so everything is statistics adjacent. But there's quite a variety of projects like in the program. Some of them will be applied projects with kind of partners on campus. I mean, last year 3 of them were tidy-classed R projects, so contributing new algorithms to tidy-classed. I shouldn't say new algorithms, ones that have not been built into tidy-classed yet. So it's a thesis-driven program, so they do independent research. So the ones that work with me tend to do R. Although I have a couple more just, like, applications and stuff. I've actually got one this quarter working on my like, something related to my PhD thesis, which I haven't really touched since I graduated, so that's very cool. Um, but yeah, it's all statistics writ large.
what was your journey like sort of into data science and being a professor? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so I started college thinking I would do either pure math and physics or English and French, so I was, like, all over the place. And then when I took a probability class with Joe Blitzstein, who was my advisor in undergrad, that was what made me say, "Oh, no, I'm gonna do statistics, this is so cool." So it was very much a focus on statistics, we weren't really, saying data science too much back then anyway, and so then I guess, my classes used R, but I didn't really learn R, and then I did a senior thesis with Joe Blitzstein, where I was doing a lot of simulation in R, so that was where I came to, I guess I wouldn't say at that point I loved it, I would say at that point I knew how to use it. And then I went to grad school, and a lot of my work was also, like, R, but again, that wasn't the main focus. I'm just focused on R because, like, my path to data science is definitely as an R person. And then I came to Cal Poly, and my first year at Cal Poly, I went down with a colleague, with Shannon Pileggi, to, the RStudio conference, and it was just like that was the awakening. It blew my mind. But even then, like, I wouldn't have said data science. Even then, the data science program at Cal Poly, we call it a cross-disciplinary studies minor, but it's more of a double major with CS and Stat. Um, but I wasn't teaching in that because that's largely Python, and also, like, I didn't know much about predictive modeling and stuff. So I still wouldn't have said data science even though I was doing a lot of R and teaching the R classes. And then eventually, I say during COVID, I picked up the Python class and I learned Python. And that was, yeah, more or less that was when I was teaching in the data science program, so I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm a data science professor now." But to me, there's not a difference between data science and statistics, like, I think they're kind of 2 words for the same thing. I mean, certainly there's the, like, theoretical math, stat, and probability that's maybe outside the sphere, but I don't really make a distinction between statistics and data science, so I don't really care which one.
It's a little bit of a marketing term. Like, I
Yeah.
guess there was an effort to position it as like statistics done in a business context and by people with domain knowledge. I remember the whole like Drew Conway famous Venn diagram, but
There are people in domain fields doing data science, right? And I don't necessarily know that it's accurate to describe all of those people as data scientists, right? Like, I have worked with biological data often, and I am not a biologist, you know? Um, so, I sometimes, because it's a marketing term, I sometimes think it's overused as, like, a catch-all for, "I touch data with a computer," but, like, these days, everybody touches data with a computer, not almost everybody, you know? And so to me, like, data scientist is more like the set of skills that lets you tackle any data set that comes your way. Um, which you could still, I guess, break that set of skills into many stages, and some of them are more computer science oriented, and some of them might be more like statistics and analysis oriented. So I don't want to erase computer science from the equation, but it just feels like here's some data, how do we make conclusions is already what statistics is doing. So uh, I don't really make a huge distinction. I have a friend who he used to say that we should start calling all our classes data science, and we should call the probability class theoretical data science.
I mean, I think one of the problems that emerged was that at a certain point, data scientist wasn't a specific enough term, and it started to include too many skills, and so then businesses were searching for these like unicorn individuals who are like really good at DevOps and building pipelines and configuring stuff in the cloud, but also like know how to do statistics and do causal inference and all those things, as well as being like really good software engineers. But I think like the reality is that now things have become like more specialized, and I find that I see fewer and fewer job postings and companies that are searching specifically for a data scientist and more looking for like a statistician or a research engineer or an AI infrastructure engineer or like a data infrastructure engineer or something like that, which seems like a healthy thing because then they actually know what they want rather than expecting this like unicorn person who's an expert at doing everything.
Yeah, but I'm surprised you say that trend though, because the students are always asking me like, how do I search for jobs? Because I search data scientist, and then like this one wants SQL, and this one wants R, and this one wants none of the above. And I just tell them like search by skill or language instead.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
It's interesting. I know DVT at their Coalesce conference had an interesting talk that was like down with data science, which was a little bit more about the kind of like broadness of the title versus like more specific things.
One of the dirty secrets, or maybe uglier reality, is that a lot of data science roles, especially like thinking about like the mid 2010s to the late 2010s, a lot of those jobs ended up being essentially doing business intelligence, like building dashboards and counting things, and not actually doing that much statistics or real data analysis. Like maybe some exploratory data analysis, which is a real thing that does require skill and experience, but like a lot of the end deliverables would be like crafting dashboards and reports and things that were a little bit more mundane. And so now you're seeing more of those roles are being a little bit more reframed as like you're an analytics engineer or a or a like a business intelligence engineer or something like that. More or less a dashboarding specialist, or like being able to build all the stuff that goes into producing the final dashboard that gets delivered to the business.
Yeah. Yeah, Kelly, I'm curious, like, have you seen changes over time in like what students want to do, whether they think of it as stats or data science?
Um, I mean, I think that longer term, like 10 to 15 years, there's definitely a move towards more interest in programming, in learning R or Python and then using that in the job. Uh, Honestly, right now, the students are struggling to get jobs, and so they are not being picky about it. So a lot of them are ending up in like good jobs that pay them to do data things, and it's not really necessarily their dream. We're seeing a few more go into grad school, in the last couple of years, go into PhD programs after our masters or that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting side of it, sort of just the like demand for jobs, how that
Yeah.
affects
There was
students.
a bubble. I mean, there's also whatever's happening in the economy right now, but there was a data science bubble, right, that's kind of on the edge now, where when I majored in statistics in undergrad, I was one of, I think, 8 that graduated my year, and now it's 500 per year, in that program. So, and then data science obviously wasn't like a thing, and now there's degrees in data science. So I think there's also just the delay when the market needs something to when like educational programs can deliver that thing. And so now there's enough data scientists going into the market for the needs of the market. And so it's harder for students to find specific jobs. Can't pick and choose quite as much as someone who graduated, 7 years ago or something.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
interesting you mentioned like before too, you said something like people in domains were already doing data science. Like there were people sort of like specialized in things already analyzing data. It is interesting the shift like from that 8-person class that's more like general, like analyzing data, less specific to a domain, to kind of like 500 people focused on kind of the broader, I
Well,
guess the more
and those would be
methodological
statistics
side or
programs, so I think it's still equally general. It's the same program, just more people wanting a statistics degree than it used to be. It used to be a very niche degree. Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's interesting there's so many people trying to like go that way.
Yeah, it is true right now that there's a little bit of like a quiet, let's say like a quiet recession combined with perhaps like depending on who you ask, like an AI driven reduction in entry level jobs and things like that. So, I mean, it's always curious. It's been interesting last couple of years talking to folks in education and academia just to see how like AI is affecting like affecting the students, affecting their psychology. I know like among people doing like kids in school doing computer science, there's a lot of existential dread about like, is there going to be a job waiting for me when I graduate? I feel like maybe statistics and data science work in general maybe is a little bit more robust to some of that because I feel like data science is still one of the areas where human judgment and having a human in the loop is still really important. And so maybe we'll be slightly more resistant to some of the like AI erosion, like maybe somebody doing computer science work going to build a CRUD data entry app at a, Fortune 500 company. Maybe those jobs are more likely to be eliminated than somebody with statistic skills who actually needs to like analyze data and do real and do like nuanced analysis that is more difficult to automate with a coding agent. I don't know, like I'd be curious, like what you're seeing or like what the vibe is.
Yeah, it's pretty like the AI can ace all my exams, including my conceptual exams. So it can figure out like what's the right statistical test or model to use given some data information. So it can do a lot of like sort of base level things. The places where I've found the human judgment most needed, I guess, would be the EDA, honestly. I mean, AI can produce, like, exploratory plots and so forth, or maybe spot little issues, but the understanding of the structure of the data, like, does this observational unit really address the problem that I'm trying to address? Like, that still feels like it needs a human. Um, and then I've found, every now and then when I'm, like, stuck on my own applied project and I'm like, "What model should I be trying here?" If I turn to AI, it usually gives me unnecessarily overcomplicated answers. They're not wrong per se, but they're, like, more than is needed. Uh, so I suspect that just will continue to improve a little bit, but, the judgment to know when AI has gone overboard is maybe where a human is needed. Um, yeah, certainly you can't, like, quite vibe code as directly as you can with some of these coding tasks, but, uh, I think that those jobs, especially, like, more basic data analysis jobs are still, um, in danger of being taken over, yeah.
I know you're working on some projects, and you mentioned before that you are using Gen AI a little bit, and sort of being productive with AI on some projects. I'm curious. You talked a little bit about EDA and that dynamic. I'm curious some of your other interactions.
I'm very resistant to using it for any writing, maybe because I'm an English minor. I still am attached to writing my own things, so I'm resistant to that, but on the other hand, like, the essay or the papers I'm getting from my students are much better. I don't hate that I don't have to read as bad of writing anymore, but for myself, I honestly don't use it that much in my research. I use it, like I said, sometimes to, like, suggest the next path forward. I've used it to unstick myself when I can't motivate myself to work. And more often than not, I'll say, "I'm trying to write this thing, can you write it for me?" And then it's writes it, and I hate what it's right, like code, I mean, and I hate what it's written. And so then it motivates me because 'cause I'm like, "This is not correct. Here's the correct way to do it," and so I actually go do the thing. The place where I really used it, this might be what you're referencing, is, a student and I have been working on a Quarto extension, and, like, figuring out the structure to make a Quarto extension was pretty straightforward. I took a really great workshop at, PositConf about it, but also there's good documentation. But the one we wanted to write, it had to be JavaScript. It couldn't be done in R. Um, and so and I don't know JavaScript. So the way that I did this is I literally went line by line. I didn't write the whole program in R because it didn't really make sense, but I would say, "Okay, like, what I'm trying to do here is, I don't know, loop through all of these strings looking for a regular expression." So I'd write the one line in R, like, per map, stir detect, whatever, and copy that line into ChatGPT and say, "Translate this to JavaScript." And then I'd copy that back in and I'd run it on some tests. So it was like a very tedious process, and it didn't work to just design the whole thing and say, "Write me this in JavaScript." Partially because it wasn't perfect and partially because, like, I don't have the ability to debug a full program in JavaScript. but I do have the ability to debug line by line, test this line and make sure it does what I want. So that was where I was using it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And this is just for context, you said the Flourish extension. Is that right? To highlight like different aspects of code.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if you ever used Flare back in the day, but Flare was the version for R Markdown that was totally built in R, and, like, Quarto opens up so many cleaner ways to do what Flare was doing. Flare was very hacky, but what it's for is so that you can, like it's for teaching mainly, so that you can establish you've written a code chunk, and when you show it to the students, you want it to highlight, all the functions or something like that, but you still want it to be reproducible so that what you're running is the output of that code, so yeah, the Flare and then Flourish is a way to with Flourish, you put it in the Quarto comments, and you say, like, which words in the ensuing code you want to be highlighted, and so it still behaves like an ordinary code chunk in every way, but the visual on the screen also has the highlighting in addition to the syntax highlighting, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, if I understand with Flare, you kind of got meta. You like were calling a function over the code you wanted to format to
Yeah, with
output.
Flare, I was using, like, the sub-render tricks in knitr. So I was running the render, pulling the raw HTML that outputs from that render just on the one chunk, and then, like, manually injecting HTML wrappers to make it be, highlighted with a yellow background or what have you. So it was very hacky. Yeah.
I know you mentioned like really enjoying collaboration and being around people. You mentioned you have some applied projects with friends on campus.
Mhm.
Is this
Yeah.
like projects with other professors or
Yeah, I think the one that is the most fun to talk about is my collaborator in history. His name is Greg Domber, and he works on the Polish Revolution. So, like, in 1989, in Poland, they all met. This group of 500 and some people met at a series of meetings and like peacefully transitioned from communism to democracy or dictatorship, communism, right? And and so he has collected, like, painstakingly by hand over a decade, data about those 500 people and what they were doing since 1950. So he has this, like, wonderful longitudinal social network data that is, these 2 people were in this organization together, these 2 people co-signed this protest letter, etcetera. Um, yeah, and then I've been working for, like, 8 years now on that data. The first thing was cleaning it, which was a big I give him credit because he wrote it all down in a spreadsheet, and that's, like, very impressive for a historian, but there was a lot of work to do. And then we made a Shiny app where you can explore these, and we presented it in Poland a year and a half ago, which was very cool, and now we're working on kind of doing some, like, modeling analysis to talk about, people that were in this one organization, were they in some way more impactful than people in this other organization, that sort of thing.
how'd you get involved with that? Like, how'd you get in the door on
He
that?
like, the second week that I landed on campus, he sent me an email because I had listed my research interests on the website, and I put digital humanities because I really like, text analysis, literary analysis, that sort of thing. Um, and he we got coffee on campus, and he was telling me all this, like, "Oh, I have this idea that if we had, these connections and we could study it," and he had a really good vision for it as someone who isn't a data scientist. I mean, he might be now, but he wasn't then. Um and I was getting more and more skeptical, like, okay, like, plenty of people have these aspirations where they think that statistical analysis is just, like, throw everything in a blender and you get a magic answer, and then he opened his spreadsheet, and I was like, "Oh, you have data. You've actually collected this data and structured it in a clean not clean, but a consistent anyway, form." So, yeah, it was very cool, and so we've just been working on it ever since and become great friends.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear. I feel like just about how you choose projects or like how projects run past your desk as a statistics professor.
There are way more available than we have time to do, right? There's plenty of people on campus who want help with their data. Um, our department has a consulting service that sometimes you, like, make connections through that. Um, Greg obviously just reached out to me. My other applied project right now with my friend Katie Watts, was actually we have a data science capstone sequence where the students get in groups and work on a real project. And so we solicit projects from campus for that. And so she brought her data to that. And then, that made a lot of progress. And then one of those students is now continuing that progress as a master's project with me. So It just builds from there. Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is like how you pick up new skills or how you spend time staying current. And I know you mentioned like some of the challenges of being an educator.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think, like, a thing that I wish people thought about more as far as educators, and especially educators, my job is not a research job. There's a little bit of research element, but it's a teaching job, right? I you know, people in the industry say, "Oh, like, Python is now a little more of a lingua franca, we want Python, or we want SQL, or we want whatever." And how am I going to teach that to a student if I didn't learn it, right? And so the only way that I'm gonna teach that to a student is I'm gonna go out and learn it myself. That's kind of fun sometimes, but it's not, I don't have any extra time in my day to do that. I'm not paid to do that. It really is a labor of love anytime you pick up a new skill. So there's this disconnect where there's sometimes, the industry needs, especially in this field that moves so fast, and the industry needs are not things we can offer, for the graduates going into the industry because we don't know them. So, when I picked up Python, that was literally just I learned it. Like, I did my own class. I inherited some materials from someone else, worked through them, and then tried to teach them, and it was rough the first time. And there's a big demand for SQL right now in our department. I would be happy to learn SQL, but I don't have time. So that's tough. So as far as new skills that I pick up for fun for myself, I think of a lot of the R work I do not as work. I think of it as a thing I do for fun. So when something exciting, you know, comes across my blue sky or I find out in a conference or something and then I like get an idea and sit down and do it, that doesn't feel like a work task. It feels like the same as when I cut stickers on my Cricut. It's like a hobby. So I pick up new skills in the R world just because I'm excited to. But when it's like skills needed for class, and then there's this decision in the classroom too of there's these skills that I've picked up. Do I build them into the class? I mean, even the moment where we converted our R class from base R primary to tidyverse primary, that was a lot of work, even though I knew the tidyverse. It's no, there's the conversion. And I'm actually, Wes, you might have an interesting thought. I went through this fall of whether I needed to rebuild my Python class with polars, and I ended up not doing it this time, but I feel like I need to build it in there soon. And then there's the whole, DuckDB Arrow world. Do I build that in at some point? So even the stuff that I know how to do, that's a different thing than having built the materials to teach it, which also is in my free time. So yeah.
Right now, I'm having a conversation with my editors at O'Reilly about Python for data analysis, which is now a 13-year-old book, and we're talking about a fourth edition. And so I think we're going to do a fourth edition that still uses pandas, but I'm using polars more and more. And maybe 2 years ago, I used polars a little bit and would run into bugs and it would crash, and it felt like it wasn't ready for prime time. Whereas like I'm building stuff with polars. I'm not writing that much polars code directly. I'm having Claude Code write a lot of the polars code, but it's fast. It's got an API that's especially for dealing with complex data sets and dealing with more Arrow like data, like JSON data and stuff like that. It's definitely a lot more powerful and expressive for like some of those more complex transformations. But yeah, this transitional period where like people need to know pandas and maybe polars, and then maybe eventually things will become more polars native in the future. One of the good things for education is that polars is a lot smaller API, is a lot less complex in many ways than pandas, and so I feel like it may actually be easier to teach. And there's like fewer rough edges. You don't have to care about it. There's no indexes, and so I know that indexes is one of those like complexities that people coming from the R world find very tedious and unintuitive in pandas. And so I totally feel that pain.
Yeah. And it is interesting to Wes's point about pullers. Like sometimes these tools, if they do offer like a simplification, maybe like the whole class gets easier versus like shifting to something.
Yeah, I'm definitely pro like a simpler API is one version of better. I'm not always like attached to speed or breadth of abilities. Um, but not from the teaching. I mean, from the teaching perspective, I want them to have the skills that they need going forward, which right now pandas I'm trying really hard to say pandas. I get really made fun of because for some reason I got in the habit of saying pandas, like it's a Greek word. I'm trying really hard to do
I
it
actually
right.
say pandas more like the Greek version. Yeah.
Yes. Of the man himself, stamp of
There it
approval.
is.
That's
You have it
amazing.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, I get made
Yeah,
fun of a
Oh,
lot
this
for
is
this
your
if you
stuff.
full
watch like
permission.
early videos of me talking about the project, it's definitely more pandas and not pandas. Yeah, it is like
That just made my whole
yeah,
week.
this
Oh,
exotic
I need to make a
pandas
list.
library.
This is fantastic. Now I just need to get everyone saying data.table and then I'll stop being made fun of. Anyway, train of thought. Yes, pandas. Oh yeah, so like in the jobs that they're going into, I have the impression that the data science teams are still using pandas over polars at the moment. So I'd rather send them out able to use pandas. But, we'll see.
Okay, so maybe this is a good question for like Wes. Like we talked a little bit about like staying current, and I saw like one thing you had asked us before this is like how do we stay current or up to date on things? Uh, Wes, do you have any takes on like how do you stay on top of technology or pick up new tools?
It's hard. It's really overwhelming to know what to pay attention to at any given time because there's only so much new information you can take in and internalize. And so just choosing like what new things to learn about and get your mind wrapped around, I find is really difficult. And so I hadn't I had hardly used polars at all until maybe a year or two ago. Like I knew that it existed. I knew that it was in development. It was actually relief for me because when we started the Arrow project about 10 years ago, I thought that I was going to get on the hook to build a next generation pandas-like library that was based on Arrow. But fortunately, Richie showed up and started building polars, and it's as good or better than anything I could have built. If I had decided to work on that thing. I, you know, I was a little bit AI skeptical for a long time, and so I turned a blind eye for a really long period of time to everything AI related in the Python ecosystem, and Python has become a little bit taken over by the AI world in recent years. And so I was looking at like the top 100 most popular, at least based on GitHub stars projects on GitHub, and half the projects are projects that I've never heard of. I'm like, gosh, like there's this project that I've never heard of, and it's got 50,000 stars on GitHub. Like I feel like I don't know anything. So it's hard, and I'm sure that people listening also identify with like that struggle. That it seems like every day you go to Hacker News, or you go to Reddit, and there's a new project that is getting a lot of attention that you haven't heard of. But I think what's interesting is that when I started out working in this area, and this is probably true of all of us, is that data science and Python and R were not mainstream at all, and now it's become so mainstream, and so that's just increased the volume of new projects and things going on, and so it's 100 times harder to keep in touch and to be aware of all the things that are going on compared with what it was like 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, pause it. It's interesting, like being on the open source team. Like, I think similar to like teaching a course. Like, if you're teaching a Python course, it's a good excuse to learn Python. I feel like a lot of that happens in open source too, where you're like, if I could build some useful open source tool that uses some technology, it's like a good excuse for me to kind of familiarize myself with that technology. But it is hard because then it has to be maintained forever. So there is a sort of like
Yeah.
trade-off.
Yeah, I'm curious about that from both of you. Like, it could be a full-time job just maintaining your existing projects. So how do you decide where to split your brain power between making sure that project stays current versus like any new ideas that you might have?
Fortunately for me, like it seems that the pattern that I've developed over the years is that I start or help start projects and then get them to a place of critical mass where I recruit developers to join the core team to maintain the project, and then when the project is being sufficiently well looked after and maintained, I move on to start the next project. And so uh, a fortunate side effect for me is that I'm not actively maintaining any open source projects right now. Of course, there's a large team maintaining pandas, and there's a team of people maintaining Arrow, and IBIS is in need of more maintainers. So if anybody listening is interested in doing helping maintain IBIS, I may get back involved in the project because I think it's an important project that should still has a bright future. But it's hard. And another thing that I spoke about in a talk recently was that with now with generative AI and ChatGPT and Claude and all these things, like it's going to lead to much more use of these open source projects because ChatGPT and friends are all really good at writing pandas code, and they're all really good at writing polars code. And so now the effective, the addressable audience, the addressable user base of people who can become polars users or become pandas users is probably 10 or 100 times what it was before. And so, to go from 10 million global pandas users to 500 million pandas users who are now running into the same bugs and issues that everyone else is running into. But OpenAI isn't helping maintain pandas. So what the heck? I mean, maybe at some point they should, but they're not right now. So
I wonder, are there Python users who don't know they're Python users? My friend just showed me, he's planning his wedding, and he's like, "Oh, I just asked ChatGPT to code me an app that I can use for tracking guests and so forth." And he showed me this app, and I said, "What language is this app in?" And he's like, "Oh," he never saw the back end of the app. It just built and deployed.
because LLMs are not good at doing data analysis directly, so they need to offload all of that onto, you know, our code or Pandas code or whatnot. And so, yeah, anybody who's asking an LLM to do any kind of analysis is gonna end up touching one of these libraries. So, if we had perfect knowledge of the future going back in time when we created these open source licenses, if we could have baked in some kind of AI use royalty payment into the license, it's free to do whatever you want, but if you use this code, if you use code that involves this library to train your models, and then you offer suggestions that you provide, I mean, even if ChatGPT provided a hundredth of a cent or a thousandth of a cent for every response that it provides that uses Pandas code, I'm pretty confident that would generate a lot of revenue that would help fund maintenance in the project. But we'll never retroactively be able to do something like that, and I don't even think that would be the right thing to do. It's best for the software to be free, and free isn't freedom, and free isn't beer. So
It is interesting though. I feel like anytime ChatGPT starts rolling pandas, it is kind of surprising to think about that. Yeah, this tool is just how it's thinking about data, basically. That's how it works through data.
Well, yeah. Well, the flip side of that question is that, and the thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I ask everyone about it, what they think, is that it will be hard to get people to use new open source projects when their AI assistants don't know how to use them yet. And so it creates this chicken and egg problem where ChatGPT is really good at using pandas because there's huge amounts of training data available on GitHub and all over the internet of people using pandas to solve problems. And so they've been able to take in all of this data and become really good at solving problems with pandas. But suppose a new tool comes along and there's just not a corpus of training data to teach the LLMs how to use them. And so that basically, if people become utterly dependent on AI tools to do anything, then new projects will never get used. They'll never get training data generated. I mean, maybe the LLMs will read the documentation and experiment and build their own training data sets. I don't know, but it's definitely a weird future that we're entering, where the whole model of how training data for AI gets generated is going to change fundamentally, and how people discover and use new tools. Because a lot of people are just not going to be motivated to learn how to use things the old fashioned way, where they read the documentation and they fumble around in their text editor and they experiment and learn how to use it themselves. They say, "Oh, well, ChatGPT doesn't know how to use it, so I guess I'll use something else." That's probably what's already happening, I would think.
I think, when I watch my students try to adopt a new function, they certainly turn to AI first. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would actually say, like, the AI explaining the function tends to be more digestible than reading the documentation. Um, but there's two things that are skills that they don't seem to have right now, and I don't know if any of us are experts in this. One is doing the right query, right? So if you ask, "Here's this function, show me some examples and explain why they work," that's gonna get you much further than, "What is this function?" So the prompt engineering, which is a very fancy way of saying it, but what should you ask is hard, and then the checking afterwards, Not just because AI isn't always accurate, but just because, like, still good to look and say, "This argument needs to be a data frame," or whatever, and so I'm seeing them not do those steps, and I'm getting a lot more, like, they have found a cool function that will solve their problem, and then it's not working, and the reason it's not working is they put in an array and it wanted a data frame or something like that, and they don't know how to fix that problem.
One thing I really wanted to be sure to loop back to is I love that you gave a keynote at USAR on keeping R weird. Um, I was wondering if you could just say a little bit about that, and maybe after, like, what do you think are the key ingredients to keep Python weird?
No, yeah, that was so cool of a thing to get to do. I'm not really a nervous speaker, and you can really hear that I started that one out super nervous just because I looked out and I was like, all my heroes are in this audience plus 1,000 other people. It was, like, really intimidating. But no, it was a really fun talk to put together because there's kind of the two types of weirdness, right? There's the language is a weird language, and I didn't know that because it was my first fluency. Well, it wasn't my first language, but it was the first one that I was really embedded in, and I'm not a computer scientist, and so learning from people as I got deeper into R, how it's weird, was fun. But then the community is very quirky, especially the, like, sort of tidyverse pocket, although I think that now it's just kind of a mix of everyone. I mean, I don't know if maybe Python's already weird. I do think the reputation from the outside for Python has changed a lot. It was, maybe 10 years ago or something, it was a bro language, and I had no real interest in getting involved in that community. And now it feels more like the R community, like there's pie ladies and there's fun stickers. And I met this woman at USAR this past summer who had a really cool Python tattoo and like all these things that feel special to me seem to be existing, and that makes me more excited to get involved with Python, even though I don't love writing Python code. I prefer not to, but uh, so I hope that that's spreading, and I think a lot of that comes with an openness. Like when you don't take yourself so seriously, it also makes a culture where when a beginner is asking a question, um, you don't jump on them. You don't say, "Well, it's in the documentation." A beginner doesn't know how to read documentation, and so I've always really appreciated about specifically the tidyverse pocket of the R community where back in the old days of rstats Twitter, like someone would ask a question, very basic question, and it might be like Hadley or Jenny or Mina who would jump in and answer it. And that so that feeling of like my question is so not stupid that a name that I recognize will answer me. It is like so important to making people excited to work on it. And so that's where my perception, whether it was true or not, of the bro culture back in the day for Python has changed. I now feel like it's a language that is welcoming to beginners, and I'm not sure what shifted that. This is all my semi-outsider perspective. Um, but yeah, I think that's the value of turning into like one big party instead of like this very serious, let me think about the stack and the heap sort of approach to open source.
I think on the yeah, I mean, I think on the Python side, like, I think compared with R, I think the R community by comparison, not to say it's 100% like this, but the R community is a lot more, trying to find the right description, like culturally homogenous, and that like a lot of the R community comes from like a statistical origin. Like people, they entered into learning R because they started out in statistics or biostatistics or like more of like a statistical field. And so like that's like the foundation or core of the R ecosystem. Whereas like Python started out being like a little bit more like Unix sysadmin, and then it developed the web development ecosystem. But there was always this scientific computing thing off on the side. And then that turned into a data thing, which now has gotten really big. And the data thing grew an AI appendage. And then the web developers were, a little bit uncomfortable with the rapid growth of all the data people. And so there was this weird period in the mid 2010s where I feel like the web community, the Python web community, wasn't sure what to make of like PyCon becoming a lot more about like data and science and in machine learning and AI. And so the modern Python ecosystem, I do think it's gotten a lot more accessible, like welcoming to beginners and more focused on like having a big tent, like not having like exclusionary behavior, like, oh, you haven't been doing Python since the 1990s, haha, like, you know, get out of here, noob. Like I don't really see any of that happening in the Python world like you see in some other kind of more prickly programmer communities. So it's very welcoming, but it's still very like feudal and federated, and there's like cliques and pockets of people that are separated by the type of work that they do. And so I think that the AI and machine learning people are very different from the data science people, and that were even more different from like the web developers but there's also people who are like primarily using Python to do like, you know, Arduino or like robotics projects and, you know, all kinds of stuff. So it's a yeah, it's a strange it's a strange ecosystem, but the fact that it's become so mainstream is also like for me the biggest change that you know, it's hard to, you know, I have to remind myself like, oh, Python is a mainstream language now. I used to feel niche and now it's very mainstream.
I take your point about, like, web developers being very different, federated, different from the, data science or AI, but I would push back and say most people come to Python through computer science. Like, most
That's
people see Python if they
that's
learn
true.
it,
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
yeah, in CS 101. So, most people come to R through some variety of statistics, but they're not statisticians, or they're not even taking a statistics class necessarily. Like, a lot of people are coming to R because they have data in biology, or they have data in history now, or, they have data and they're like, "This is the language people told me I should use to run my t-test," So, the statistics part is true, but it's not statisticians, right? I wouldn't say the plurality even of our users are statisticians,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it
whereas
would be
I
more
would say
fair
the
to say
plurality of Python users.
data than statistics. Yeah, to correct myself. Yeah, it's like yeah.
Yeah, so the homogeneity, I mean, maybe R is less, like, siloed than the Python community, but I think that the variability in the, like, particular skills or expertise of the people coming to the language is maybe higher. I think most people coming to Python know what a for loop is, and, like, m many people are using R successfully and don't know what a for loop is. So there's a background hetero how do you say that word? Heterogeneity? Yeah, that that makes the art community a little more you just get a lot more different perspectives, perhaps. I don't
Yeah,
know.
makes sense.
Yeah. It's it's fair to data data analysis spans so many domains that it really brings in a pretty wide net. I remember for myself, it was like I was using R so heavily to analyze psychology experiments. And then once I realized, like, I think I might want to go into industry, and maybe like at least open up software engineering as an option, I just sort of like switched immediately to Python. Um, but I do feel like that it is an interesting sort of comparison to like data analysis, people in different domains analyzing data versus more sort of like software engineering centric, computer science centric folks and what they're drawn to. If not, this opens up what I think is the most controversial take that you gave, which is I saw you listed candy corn as a top tier
Yes,
candy, and I
correct.
actually have so many questions. Um, does this okay by top tier? Are you saying it's an all year candy,
Oh,
or
yeah, if I
what
can
do you
get my
think?
hands on it,
Okay,
absolutely. Yeah, it's like red vines, candy corn.
uh-huh. You want to see
Tell you, when I
candy
was in
corn
high
brought
school
out of the seasonal.
I was playing a lot of sports, so I, like, ate like a vacuum, and I would come home from school from my, like, back-to-back practices, and I'd eat a bag of candy corn and drink a full Gatorade just like
Oh my
this
gosh,
in high school.
that
Too old for that now.
it's incredible. They need candy corn flavored Gatorade. That's the solution, you know? I don't know. Actually, that kind of
Yeah.
freaks me
Yeah,
out.
Fierce Lime Gatorade was discontinued, and that was my
Yeah. And how would you I guess for, like I don't know how universal candy corn is, So if you had to describe candy corn for someone who's like mentally picturing like a tiny piece of corn that's been candied, how would you paint the picture of what a candy corn is, just to be sure people know what we're talking about?
You're asking me to deconstruct the definition of
Just paint the
candy corn?
picture a candy
It
corn.
is it is sugar in triangular prism form, and the important thing about candy corn, any sugar is sugar, but is the texture, right? It has the perfect texture to make your teeth feel good chomping on it without it sticking. That's why
Yeah,
it's top tier.
I feel that.
Yeah.
It's like, and the texture, I guess, is like inspired by wax in a way. Is that it's like kind of
Suppose.
like
You gonna tell me that
maybe
you've
not.
never taken the wax from one of those, what are the little cheese things with the wax on the outside and chewed on it as a kid?
No, it's even more controversial. You mean like the
I'm
little
not
rubber
recommending that
seal?
one, but, when you're a
Yeah,
kid and you're like, "I don't know,"
yeah.
and eat it.
Maybe I should try. I mean, even as adult, I'm open to it as an adult. So that's my next.
You can report back.
I'll report back. Next episode, I'm just gonna be chomping on one of those like wrappers, and we'll see what happens. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for coming on. I feel like I just love the energy you bring to the art community, and anytime I
Appreciate
see
it.
you at a comp and you're wheeling, I'm actually so sad I didn't. I have them back here, I think.
The R earrings,
You're
yeah.
yeah, you were slinging earrings, laser cut earrings. I so deeply appreciate the community and just like welcoming. Also, the level of pump you bring into situations, like the
I mean,
whole the
it's
whole meal
fun,
deal.
right? Like, for me, PositConf is like a highlight of the year. We go to board game conventions, and then we go to my R convention is how I think of it, and, yeah, I think, well, I had planned my wedding so that I could go to Conf last year because,
You
I don't
gotta
wanna miss it, it's so fu
priorities.
and then now, having now gone for the 8 years, I guess, not counting COVID, like, these people are my real friends, Michael, I'm excited to see you. Sorry, Wes, this is the first time I've talked to you, but, it's like a reunion too, so I don't know that I appreciate you saying that you like the enthusiasm, but the enthusiasm is not again, I don't view it as work, like, I'm really appreciative of all the things that the people are doing in the community. I didn't start the earring thing, I didn't start the crafting, I didn't start the hex stickers, I just get to benefit from that, and, it's yeah, I, feel very grateful for all the things that the people have built, both the actual technological tools, but the community that's formed, it
Yeah.
it makes my job much more
It's
fun, for sure.
no, it's incredible. I think that like really shines through, and I'm so excited for years and years of keeping our weird. So
I
thanks.
learned that I
Yeah,
didn't coin that. I don't know how that phrase got stuck in my head, but Hadley dug up some talk he gave from way back when where he had a "keep our weird" slide, and I feel like it's almost certain that I saw that and it stuck in my head, so everything I do
I
is
love that.
derivative of,
I think taking a slide to keynote is such a
did it
beautiful.
on
If
purpose.
someone had to like expound, write a thesis on the keeping of weirdness. So I'm glad it was you, and thanks so much for coming on. And I'll see you at the next conf and on the
Yeah,
internet
thanks for
probably.
having me, and, I'll see you, if not sooner, at the next conf.
That's great.
And Wes, great to talk to you. Really appreciate everything you've done for iPhone.
The Test Set is a production of Posit PBC, an open source and enterprise tooling data science software company. This episode was produced in collaboration with creative studio Agi. For more episodes, visit thetestset.co or find us on your favorite podcast platform.